That this meeting is calling to order. It is 9:00 a.m. I did just see one of our commissioners walking down the hall, so we'll take a moment. We are going to be reconvening the special BCC meeting, Santa Fe County Water, today and tomorrow, leading from the number one question whenever a development is approved or being considered: where is the water going to come from? Where is the water coming from? The meeting was, again, this is a continuance of another meeting that was held. There are no changes to the agenda that we have worked on, but we will do an approval of the agenda. I've called the meeting to order, and if we may have a roll call, and I do understand that Commissioner Hughes is on his way.
Commissioner Kakar-Stone. Commissioner Johnson.
He'll be late.
Commissioner Green. Commissioner Hughes.
He's on his way.
And Chair Bustamante.
Present. Some of you might be wondering why the commissioners aren't sitting at the dais and why we're in this strange format. And as strange as it may be, the interest is putting more of the perspective on our constituents. The questions come from our constituents, taking the focus off of the commission. This presentation, this was all organized in the interest of informing and including the community. And we had approximately people, how many did we have online last go? We had approximately 36 people paying attention online. I've since informed people that this is going to be posted, and there will be people who will have access to this information now for the coming year. So I understand there have been no changes to the agenda. Is there anyone who'd like to clarify whether there have been changes or any changes? Manager Schaefer? There are no changes to the agenda. May we have a motion to, do we need to move to approve the agenda if it was the same agenda? We don't need to move to approve the agenda. Okay. All right, so here is Commissioner Hughes. We are starting from land use entitlement process for development growth management. So what are the steps that growth management takes when we have something come before us to ensure that there is water? And our first speaker will be Alexandra Ladd from Growth Management.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to everyone. I appreciate the chance to be here to talk to you about all of this, and I'm happy that we reconvened, although I was ready to go last time too. Okay, so today with me is Herbert Foster, one of our planning team leads, and he's going to do part of the presentation. Dominic Cisneros, I'm going to play the part of Dominic Cisneros because he had a long-planned holiday to take his son to the 49ers game in Phoenix, so he is not here, but I will play his part instead. How come it's not? Sorry. Oh no. I'm scared. Oh, how's that going? Does this need to be muted? Oh my gosh. Yes. Did I just, if I mute it here, I just muted this too. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so I think a big question comes up a lot. How much is Santa Fe County growing, really? And it appears, because we've had a flurry of development activity, that, boy, we're just gangbusters growing. But when you look at historic records, we are not growing the way we historically have grown. Now, this is percentage of growth, so obviously if you have a very small population, you don't have to add a lot of people to have a very high growth rate, and our population's much bigger to begin with. But you can kind of see, I think there's a little blip at 2020 that could be a COVID Zoom boom effect right there. But in the last year, our growth rate was 0.12%. We've grown 8.18% since 2010. A third of our population, our adult population, are seniors. And I threw this stat in there just because I thought it was kind of interesting. We have 82 residents per square mile. So even though it feels like we're just so much development and growth going on, the majority of our county does not have any humans. There are probably more cows than humans. So we do have, we're not a dense county overall. And to put that into context, I don't know why these arrows are not working. I'm so sorry. I feel like my kids would be cringing if they saw me. So should I just be hitting that? Okay. So the UNM's Bureau of Business and Economic Research provides the role of state demographer for the state of New Mexico. So I looked at some of their growth projections for Santa Fe County. And in fact, we will continue to grow, and then we'll level off, and then we will not grow. And there are a few factors that affect these projections. And of course, a projection is a well-educated guess. It's not a forecast. But the three factors that affect growth rate: fertility. So who's having babies? Are there enough people to have babies? And when we look at the number of people in the different generations, there was a graphic I saw that I wish I'd put in here, because it was the baby boom generation's gigantic, and then Gen X, and then it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. So even if everyone's having babies, you're still going to have fewer babies because we just don't have as many people who are childbearing age. Mortality, so people are living longer. So but back to the statistic of a high percentage of senior population, at some point, birth versus death, you're going to have more deaths than birth. And then in-out migration. This is the big unknown, because we don't know what factors may change or may play into why people move here or why people move away from here. So with that in mind, I wanted to just provide a little snapshot of the building permits that we've had in Santa Fe County since 2015, which was when we, shortly before we adopted the Sustainable Land Development Code and the Sustainable Growth Management Plan. And you can see the bright red are single-family residences, the bluish color, the turquoise color, are accessory dwellings, and the mustardy color are mobile home and placements for mobile homes. We kind of went down over the last year. And so we think there are probably a few factors. We think that all of a little residual effect of the high interest rates, and because development, between the time you get your financing and you actually stick a shovel in the ground, can be a couple years. And so the current high interest rates have caught up, so fewer projects are getting initiated and to the stage of being built. And I won't even say it, but there have been some question marks about what do tariffs mean for the construction industry, and I think there are a lot of folks who are pretty reluctant to leverage themselves with a lot of uncertainty. And then what's in the pipeline? So what do we know is coming online in the next year or two? Herbert's going to go into the sustainable development area, but that's what SDA means, sustainable development area. We have 3 of them in Santa Fe County. We're only looking at 2 of them because those are the ones that, SDA 1 is our growth area. SDA 2 is the next area of growth, so it's a little bit further down the line, but Herbert will cover that in his presentation. Right now, and then there's a column for the city. All of the units in the column for the city are the county's project on county-owned land that's within the city limits, so it will be served by city water. So you can see this number is almost 3,000, and of that number, 1,000 of them will be price restricted and set aside for income qualified folks. So that's a great percentage. And the pie chart shows the percentage in the Sustainable Development Area 1, which is almost 90%. And then the next question, well, how do we know we need all this housing? The county's affordable housing plan, this is a plan that's required by the state of New Mexico in order to qualify the exemption to the anti-donation clause for affordable housing. So it looks at a variety of factors, basically looks at how many people live here, income ranges, and how many homes, and what the price ranges of those homes are, and then determines what the gap is. And according to this plan, 17,000 additional housing units are needed between 2022 and 2025 to accommodate the existing employees and residents of Santa Fe County. Now, this doesn't mean that people aren't housed. It means they're inadequately housed, they're doubled up with other families, or they're extremely cost burdened. And that, the cost burden factor for sure, as well as being inadequately housed, that's gonna drive out migration, right? So that's gonna cause people to wanna leave because they need to have more affordable home costs, and that has all sorts of economic implications in terms of our job market and who can afford to live here and work here. So the 17,000 number, so if we remember what the prior slide said, that's a big chunk. This is pretty amazing that we've had this much progress in terms of production over these couple of years. But we have a long ways to go, and this isn't even thinking about that future growth. So I think my point here when it comes to water isn't, I think that the question to ask isn't, do we have enough water? The question is, how do we ensure that we manage our water so that everyone who wants to live here can live here? And Jacqueline's going to talk a lot more about lots of great ideas for how we can do that, how we can incentivize conservation, but also water reuse and all the other ways that technology is coming on board to make it easier as well. And I think we already have a great culture here in this community of being water conscious and saving water, but it's, we do have a ways to go, and so we'll talk more about policy versus regulation versus kind of community culture about water. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Herbert, and he's going to talk a little bit about how do we even get to this concept of a sustainable development area.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Herbert, a planning team leader in the planning division. One of the teams I'm leading is our efforts to revise the Sustainable Growth Management Plan. So I'm here to talk a little bit about what the Sustainable Growth Management Plan is and how it addresses water resources at a fairly high level. The SGMP is a very high-level document itself. I just want to share a couple of ideas on kind of where we think we might be headed in terms of okay, thank you. In terms of where we're going in terms of revising the document itself. So what is the SGMP in the eyes of the state? It is the county's comprehensive plan, or the general plan. State law says that development regulations must be consistent with the general plan. So what we're after in our current plan and revising it is to unify the development policies and the aspirations of the community with the kind of development that is being regulated. We want to unify the plans and the policies and the regulations. It's also a comprehensive land use plan. It is a long-term comprehensive plan. They typically have, or this has a 20-year time horizon with occasional updates. The last time it was revised was in 2010 with some lighter revisions in 2015. I say comprehensive because the idea is to cover all the land within the county's jurisdiction and lead towards a preferred land use plan. But it doesn't mean that we don't partner with other land management agencies, pueblos and other state agencies and entities that own and manage land in a regional partnership because we all share similar resources and a similar future. It's comprehensive in that we try to address all the issues in the county that affect land use and growth and development. They're often called elements like housing, water, sewer, open space, transportation, and so on. We call it comprehensive because we want it to try and address or include all the voices within the community, all the diverse communities and interests that we have to try and identify kind of the broadest policies and principles that help us grow and decide on development projects. Another thing that it does do, as Alex mentioned, is it identifies 3 different sustainable growth development areas. SDA is, as she said, there's 3 of them in the county. There is SDA 1, which is basically a policy of grow now. SDA 2, which is basically grow later. SDA 3 is grow much later. And I argue that this is an inherently not sustainable model. It's a model based on infinite growth. So as soon as we fill up number 1, well, we just go into number 2, and as soon as 2 is done, we go into number 3. Now, this could be many, many decades or generations until we actually do that, but nonetheless, I argue that it's not sustainable, and we need to take a closer look at the quality and character and the type of growth that is happening within these lines, because otherwise we'll continue the trend of what we call sprawl. Dispersed development that can often be more expensive and more have often consequential impacts to the environment and communities. The SGMP itself, and how does the current document address water policy and support sustainability? I mentioned earlier that there's a number of elements in the plan. It addresses water, wastewater, stormwater management in this element, describes existing conditions of water infrastructure, water policy, water law to give a broader context of what's happening in the water sector in relation to growth and development. It also includes official maps which determine where and when and under what conditions the county will participate in infrastructure investments for water and sewer and other infrastructure. There's a number of goals and policies and actions related to water, sewer, and stormwater that are intended to kind of give specific direction and guidance for the county and partners to take action for preserving, protecting, and providing a sustainable water supply. One use that we typically use for the SGMP is in development review. If there's what we call a discretionary permit, in other words, if there's a development application that comes to the department and it requires a public hearing, requires greater scrutiny from the eyes of the public and the commission, typically a greater number of studies. Our role in long-range planning in the planning division is to take a look at the development application and compare it to the goals and policies and objectives of the SGMP to see if it's consistent or not. So that's one important role. I mentioned the discretionary permits, and that is one of the criteria in the code that a discretionary permit needs to be consistent with the long-range plan, because otherwise if our short-term plans are not addressing our long-term needs, then why are we approving these developments in the first place? And finally, a few things that we're looking forward to in revising the SGMP over the next couple of years is public participation. We are under contract now and just beginning what I call a light kickoff in starting our public participation plan. And we hope to bring that to the community and the commission over the next 5 or 6 months and have that adopted. And then a formal kickoff of the SGMP revisions. The public participation plan will basically outline the different communities and audiences and voices that we need to reach out to, how we're going to communicate with them, and how we're going to collect and analyze the information that we get from them. You know, all those little Post-it notes that we get all the meetings, we'll want to make sure that we're paying attention to all those Post-it notes and how it can inform policy and give some guidance to development decisions moving forward. The SGMP revision will include a preferred land use plan to give, I guess I was saying, hopefully further clarity and guidance as to where and how we are going to grow. And that will help also relate to infrastructure improvements and be as efficient as we can with water and sewer and stormwater investments that we're making. There'll be updated goals, actions, and policies that we get from informing the public, from reaching out to expert folks and who are working in water daily. We want to make this plan as actionable and as informed and updated as possible. And then finally, one of the outcomes of the SGMP revision will be recommendations on how to update the code so that we can have a greater certainty that the kind of development that we say that we want in the plan is the kind of development that we get through the regulations of our code. So again, one of the crown jewel of this effort is to really unify the regulations and the policies. So again, what we're getting is what we want. Happy to, is now for questions or later? Thank you again.
Yeah, let's do whatever you need to do. We are doing this a little differently this time. I think we're getting some good feedback on having the presentation facing the people in the chambers. We'll open it up to questions, and Daniel will run around with microphones so that we can take the questions when you're ready, Alexandra. And we have about 30 some people online on on Teams and 10 in YouTube. So we do have some viewership. Okay, so go ahead.
Thank you. We're almost done. So now I'm going to put my Dominic Cisneros hat on, and now I'm Dominic. I just wanted to touch on briefly in the actual process of when a development comes in front of the Growth Management Department. How do we look at water supply? Herbert touched on sort of the bigger policy. Are we meeting our community's vision through the development review process? But we actually look at, does this project have a committed source of water supply? And I think one issue that's important to note is that when it's possible to connect to a public water supply, a developer does not have the option. They are required to do so. There's a much more sustainable way to manage water supply and to have the data we need to know what else we need to do to ensure sustainability. And then if a water system is not available, the applicant has to demonstrate that they have a self-supplied water source. So they have to show us their well permit from the New Mexico Environment or from the state engineer office, or if they are connecting to a mutual domestic system, they have to provide us with a ready, willing, and able letter from that entity. It's not always perfect. We're still working on our workflow a little bit to make sure that we have that information is flowing between agencies. We are in a situation where we're balancing a lot of different rules from a lot of different entities. So it's not just the county's rules we have to look at. We have to look at the state engineer. We have to look at the New Mexico Environment Department, the state DOT, and then on top of any community organization. So there's a lot of juggling around and makes it interesting. And then I think Travis talked about this. I'm going to go kind of fast through here because I think between Travis and Michael Cart, you all heard a lot about the actual technical process for the ready, willing, and able letter and how domestic wells are considered within the county's, in relation to the county's system. the ready, willing, and able letter that comes from the county's utility is documenting that the county says, yes, we have this water, we're willing to extend it to this project. And then also, and this is even a very important thing that I think we tend to overlook a little bit, that the infrastructure exists to get the water to the project. Because, we tend to think of infrastructure as like, oh, that boring thing you don't pay attention to, but it's really actually it has to be an upfront commitment, and it has to be built first. Otherwise, the rest of the project isn't going to happen. So we have to look at what infrastructure is available. And if there's a project that comes in front of the growth management staff without a ready, willing, and able letter, it's not moved forward. Their application is not complete. And then another big question, how do we enforce these county codes? We have a great code enforcement division, and they will conduct, and we've really improved, I think, our practices and increased our capacity to conduct periodic inspections to make sure that what an applicant proposed for their project is actually what is getting built. We do, again, have this sort of weird little handoff with the state's construction industries division where they're inspecting the actual structures that are being built. So sometimes they're not looking for some of the requirements that we have in our Sustainable Land Development Code because that's not part of the building code. They're just looking at the structures or the supporting elements of the project. So sometimes, we go back and we say, oh wait, you didn't follow the setback, and so sometimes things can get a little confusing. But we are always working closely with the other entities that we need to work with, and I feel like we're making improvements every day. And I think Michael Carr talked a little bit about the requirement to install a well meter and to report water usage. So we've talked about that's a difficult element to implement, but we do have code enforcement officers who can, in fact, verify that the well meter was installed. And then the Growth Management Department also requires that water covenants are recorded with every permit so that we are indicating through this covenant that there's a limit, that there's a 1/4 acre foot per year limit per residence. Okay, now we can take questions.
Are there any questions? If you raise your hand, I'll bring a microphone. And we'll also have questions from the commission as well. Ouch. There's a bruise.
Yes, I'm Stephen Schmeling from the Water Policy Advisory Committee. You talked about water supply. Could you say anything about wastewater management from new developments and how you ensure that can be adequately handled?
To be sure that they can be accurately, what was the last part of the question?
Yes, could you talk about how you ensure that a development has adequate plans in place to manage its wastewater?
So that's a great question. For developments that are hooking up to the county system, again, our colleagues in utilities are helping to verify that that's going to work. For self-supplied systems, we do require that there is documentation that describes how that's going to be handled. But that's a big question. A lot of self-supplied single-family builders, of course, are doing septic tanks, and so that's all getting permitted through the Environment Department. But the wastewater issue, I think, is probably one that we are still continuing to work on.
Thank you.
Next.
Does the regulation apply to existing businesses, and where do indigenous communities in the county play a role in this, and have they been consulted, or have you done outreach about this to them?
So let me make sure I understand your question. How involved are indigenous communities with the county's management of its water supplies? Did I get that right?
In the county, and like Tesuque, for instance, and the regulations you intend to put in place, does that apply to existing businesses, existing corporations?
So that's a great question, Brian. I might kick that one over to you for some more clarity. But I think, just to be clear, the county's regulations do not apply to the Pueblo communities. They're out of our jurisdiction. Any federal land, any state land, any Pueblo land is not covered by our rules. However, because water is a regional issue, and maybe Brian can add some detail here, we have to have those conversations regionally, and we do have a practice and a history of working with our Pueblo partners to make sure that we're managing the water for the interest of everybody, of course. Regulations apply to new development. So we don't tend to retroactively apply new rules unless an existing business or corporation changes what they're doing. So they build a big expansion of their business, or they add more units to a facility, then they have to come into compliance with the new rules, if that makes sense. That was part of your question too, right?
I'm just wondering how involved indigenous communities within the county have been on this project, because I'm sure they have a lot to contribute for solutions.
So as it relates to water, we're partnering with indigenous communities in the northern part of the county, San Ildefonso, Tesuque, Nambe, Pojoaque, as part of the Amet-Pojoaque Basin Regional Water System. We have regular dialogue with them, technical evaluation committees, as well as meeting with anywhere from support staff all the way up to the governors of each of those entities. As it relates to wastewater, the county has funding. I think it's in the order of magnitude about $200,000 that we're going to be initiating a planning effort to look at what a regional wastewater system in the Tesuque Valley corridor, much in the same corridor as we're working on the water side, but on the wastewater side, to evaluate what opportunities exist for existing partnerships and how can we build that out over time, and the feasibility of that. So that's, I would say, the planning group is charged with that, but I would say over the next couple months we'll be partnering with our partners, the Tesuque, Pojoaque, Nambe, and San Ildefonso, on a similar conversation, but on the wastewater side.
My understanding is that there are some indigenous communities in the state and maybe in the county that might not have access to running water. Or is there a planned solution for that? Or plans to solve that in the future?
If I may, just having had this work, that would, if there is, first, I don't know that that's the case in Santa Fe County, but they're under a different jurisdiction. The county does not have any authority within the tribal communities, and anything outside of the Santa Fe County area would be part of the sovereign nation's relationships with either our state government or our federal government in ensuring that they would have water. But it's their determination is what's respected in how and what they'd like to do that. But it's really out of our purview here.
Can I get your name for the record, please?
Yeah, Sagebird.
All right, thank you.
If I could, I wanted to respond to a question in terms of the Sustainable Growth Management Plan. We're at the very, very beginning of this long-range comprehensive land use plan. I mentioned it addresses the county's jurisdiction in terms of recommended regulations, but nonetheless, Pueblo's federal land management agencies will be approaching them as partners. And the first thing we're doing now is a public engagement, public participation plan. As soon as the commission adopts this plan, the very next morning, my intention is to bring a letter to and hand deliver it to the governor. And I know we want to reach out to Pueblo governments and Native organizations and nonprofits that serve Native Americans on and off the community, right? I know it's also possible at Taos Pueblo they have agreements with the city for sewer treatment. So those kinds of agreements and investments are possible. Whether or not they're being discussed here now, I don't know.
Thank you. Will your community outreach also be conducted in Spanish for the Spanish-speaking populace?
Haven't decided yet. Don't know yet. It's for sure a consideration. I'm seeing a nodding head. Yes. Yeah.
For the state to practice language access, which are, I think that there are a lot of Spanish speakers in the county who would like to be informed in their preferred language.
I agree. Absolutely. There's websites, there's things we can do to make the kind of information more accessible to different people in different languages, even any number of communication styles. Absolutely.
Yes. So I've got a couple questions, if I may. So the first one sort of tags on to the woman's previous questions about regional planning, both with our cities within the county and the pueblos, right? We don't have jurisdiction over the city of Santa Fe. We don't have jurisdiction over the city of Espanola, Edgewood, and so on. But in general, there are great opportunities for collaborative projects. And so sort of to fill in a little bit on what, what was mentioned here, Herbert. So to your point, we do have MOAs, I think, between the 4 pueblos in the north to start to investigate a regional water system, but it's in the very, very early planning stages. And so we are collaborating with them and consulting them, but it was a zero commitment on anybody's part. We just wanted to trade information so that we could know how to work together on that. And so I would hope that when we do a comprehensive plan that we would look at that, both to their growth plans, our growth plans, and that we can figure out how to make sure. Then when you talk about 17,000 units short, I would hope we would also start to look regionally. If somebody lives just over the border in Rio Arriba County, or, even, as much as we don't love the idea of people commuting from Rio Rancho, but if somebody's family, somebody works in Albuquerque and somebody works in Santa Fe, Rio Rancho is a humane place in the middle, sort of. So there's a sort of really investigating this and to say, do we really need that growth? I do think that we need to focus that growth on the workforce as opposed to second homeowners and things like that. So finding ways that the Strategic Growth Management Plan and our SLDC focus on smaller units that are more aimed at our workforce as opposed to second homeowners, and finding ways to encourage and incentivize that type of housing. And then one of the slides up there showed that we were short or that the affordability gap was on single family homes. And as much as that's an aspirational goal, single family homes are very inefficient. And that may be the typology that we want to go for, but that may not be the typology that we want to go for. And so looking at what the right mix of size and type of home, and whether it's clustered development, whether it's townhomes, whether it's multifamily, whatever it is. Like, I didn't see multifamily up there as a statistic. I saw single family homes and casitas, ADUs, but I didn't see multifamily in that statistic. So, yep, you've got an answer there. So
The answer is pretty simple. We haven't had any until the last 2 years.
okay, really? Even in townhome, maybe they count as single family homes, but in Rancho Viejo they had some clustered.
I believe that the Rancho Viejo, they're all still showing up as single family when it comes to permitting.
Okay, it'd be good to nuance that a little bit because a townhome uses a lot less water, right? It'd be interesting to see how many of those homes are hooking up to utilities, right, as a percentage of our growth, so that we start to see, 80% of our homes are in SLD 1 and they are hooking up to our water system and or our wastewater system.
And Commissioner, to that point, almost 90% of those permits are in SDA 1, which means that a huge majority of those are hooking up to the county's systems.
That's good. Good to know. Thanks. And then one of the questions I know that we've had here on the commission is how many commitments have we put out there but have yet to be built? Ready, willing, and able letters. We've approved lot development, but maybe they haven't been built, and so we have maybe 10,000. I don't know what the number is, so I'm just throwing. Are there 10,000 homes out there that we've committed to but have yet to be built? That maybe are banking, for lack of a better term, water access, when we could be using and might be the wrong type of housing for our needs these days.
Commissioner Green, I think the numbers I provided they're pretty comprehensive. Some of those projects are not in active construction, but they are to that commitment stage. But we have expiration. So these approvals do not last forever.
And it would be interesting to know how many sunset and then do expire so we can see sort of where that's going. But very interesting. Thank you for putting this together.
We have a question back here. If I can get your name for the record before you ask.
Hi, my name is Maya Clifford. I'm the general manager of the El Dorado Area Water and Sanitation District. Good morning. Hi, commissioners. Hi, County Manager Schaefer. Hi, Brian. Alex, great presentation. To Commissioner Green's most recent comment, there's a reality here, right, about how long it takes for construction to actually get constructed. I think in El Dorado, I read a statistic at some point from my predecessor that it took 18 years on average for developments to come even partway through to fruition. With the county, I guess, committing to delivering water or building phases of infrastructure to get water delivery to certain parts of the county, my question is, with that sunsetting, quote unquote, that's supposed to happen, is there going to be like a retroactive reflection back to look at past commitments that are per se more than 20 years old? And I don't know the SLDC well enough, and my general counsel isn't here with me, but I am curious about what part of the statute drives that development commitment and how long that would last before it expires with a development or a developer agreement. Like, how long is that statutorily, is that obligation live? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Maya. I was actually in my brain thinking about that meeting we had the other day and how we're working on improving that communication with the entities that supply water that aren't the county. So thank you for being here. I think, in a nutshell, most entitlements that go to public hearings, so the larger projects, mostly they expire after 2 years. There's opportunity to get an extension, a 1-year extension. I don't know, and maybe Brian can answer this, like a ready, willing, and able letter, I imagine it goes away when the entitlement goes away, but I haven't been here long enough to see that happen.
So I don't think there is a consistent ready, willing, and able letter. It's varied over the years, so some may not have an expiration date, but we're also looking at that through a closer lens with upcoming ready, willing, and ables.
And if I could add to that, Chair Bustamante, so the most recent iteration, so ready, willing, and able letter, doesn't provide any right to service to anyone. You have to, follow that up with a utility line extension and water delivery agreement. While the form of those have varied over the years, I think the most recent iterations over the last period of time that I'm aware of, probably the last decade, those agreements are tied to the underlying entitlements. So if you do not timely get your subdivision approval, which is the biggest the biggest commitments that we would be talking about, the obligation goes away. Even if you receive approval of a preliminary and final plat under state law and the SLDC, those are time limited. Alex can give you those times, but I think you have 3 years to file the plat. You might be able to extend it for 2 years, what have you. But those time frames are set forth in state law, as I recall it, and are reflected in our SLDC. So I hope that addresses your question.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, County Manager Schaefer. And thank you, Brian. One follow-up question. Well noted about the line extension and agreements that are standard practice, I think, in all water districts and county and municipal organizations across the state. You are 100% correct. I am curious, though, in the past, the county has allowed for developments to phase things over time because obviously the price of steel fluctuates and getting things to New Mexico can be, for lack of better terms, challenging. And getting, the right valves, the right pressures, the right ARVs, all the different components of building out a line take, phasing, and that's very reasonable. But I guess I'm curious about, is the county still going to allow line extensions to be phased, or is it going to harden its requirements for developers to commit more upfront, maybe funds or infrastructure, so they're not allowed to phase going forward, so that pushes the timeline forward? I'm really curious about how these timelines are going to move going forward, and how developments are going to be, or developers in some ways are going to be kind of pushed forward in a more efficient fashion, because I know that hasn't happened, at least in El Dorado, in the past. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And our past practices probably certainly have not been perfect. The growth management, we require a letter of credit or a bond for the future phases, which is a pretty big incentive to finish building it, or to decide not to finish building it and, end it there. So.
Yeah, I have a question. Back to affordable housing and Commissioner Green's comments about townhouses. Are you proposing, or are we going to see before us changes to the SLDC and that growth management plan that incentivizes more affordable housing? And when do you think that will come?
So, Commissioner Hughes, I was just looking to see if any of my affordable housing colleagues were online, because I don't want to speak for them. But we have revisions to Chapter 13 of the SLDC, which is the inclusionary zoning requirement, well underway. And I believe that at least making the application of the regulation more efficient and more effective is certainly part of that. I can't really speak to and it's possible, as we start to get out into the community to begin the revisions of the Sustainable Growth Management Plan, that's where we would establish that vision for the future. And then when we do the subsequent changes to the code, we would want to implement that vision.
Do you have any idea what changes you're proposing? Or is that the staff on affordable housing staff needs to answer that?
Well, I would defer most of that question to affordable housing staff, but I think one of the big ones, to the point of where's all the non-single family housing, we had language in the code that provided incentives and fee waivers to homeownership housing, and just sort of, forgot about other kinds of housing. So that kind of thing, we and it's very typical after a code's been in place for almost 10 years, where you start to see like, oh, we really thought that things were going to go that way and they haven't, circumstances have changed, or we just didn't realize how vague and confusing and not specific the language was. So there are lots of, I almost call it more like technical corrections to make it work better as it was originally conceived. And then once we go through the planning process, you know, that's when we would listen to the community speak and see if we had appetite and vision for more.
And do you have any timeline for those changes? Like, are we going to go to the public and the commission all get to see the changes and then vote on them?
Yeah, and you'll hear a lot more about that later this week in our strategic planning session. But the affordable housing changes are, I would say, 90% there
Okay.
to a red line state. And so we're, you know, of course, nothing moves forward as quickly as you feel like it should when you're looking at regulatory changes, but we will begin a stakeholder focus group process, and the commission will be looped in at that stage.
Okay, thank you.
With full recognition that this drives up the housing costs, will we find way? I'm just not going to say will we. How will we be sure to find ways? And I don't know that this is an answer that you would give, or this would be for a later presentation, to assure that water catchment systems, maybe reuse of gray water, things like that are part of our future developments. They're integral to how it's done. It's long been a reason to not do it because of the cost that it ensues, but this is a water conversation, and how are we going to make sure that that's happening? Is that going to come with Jacqueline, or is that going to be part of what will happen with the development code?
Commissioner Bustamante, that's a great question. I love that question. And Jacqueline's going to dive into some of those specifics. And again, like I said, we're still working on refining how do we, because we don't control the building permitting itself in-house. So if we require wonderful sustainability features, it's very hard for us to regulate that. We can regulate that they get built because that's easy. You just look and it got built, but we can't really regulate the use over time as well. So that's just a challenge, and we're working on that. Our new code enforcement supervisor used to work for CID, so that's super helpful because he really understands how their process works. And so we're continuing to refine that. So someday, my dream, I'll just say it here, is that we do this building permitting in-house, at least to the extent that we can look at how some of these sustainability features are built.
Wonderful, thank you. Commissioner Kokar-Stone?
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Herbert, for your presentation. And I wanted to pick up on what you said, Alex. I think it was a really good question. How do we ensure we manage our water to make sure all that live here have it, right? So my questions are around, as we're thinking about our strategic planning 2 days later this week, and Ms. Bird asked some good questions as well. And the first 4 presentations we had earlier in the month really talked and spoke to our current paradigm and approach to water as supply, demand, a commodity, buy, sell. How can we, and I want to, you and or your team, how can we integrate a more indigenous, holistic approach around equity and water as we think about managing it? And what would that look like in our strategic planning retreat this week to insert larger vision framework for addressing that with some clear metrics and objectives?
Commissioner, that's a great question. I don't know that I have technical expertise on the water management side to answer, to give you like a great idea about that. But I will say that I think traditionally, indigenous communities have been very, very, very good at managing water resources and reusing water and working within those rhythms of Mother Nature and what's going on in the climate. And so I think, and Jacqueline's going to probably talk about this a little bit more, we've created, or she, I don't want to talk too much about it, but we're trying to provide some materials for people, just regular homeowners, to improve their water management practices on their own personal site. So how do you build a rain garden at your house? How do you capture water coming off your roof? How do you maybe reuse your gray water, and really bringing it down to the level of the individual homeowner. So I do think that, and I don't want to speak for Indigenous values because I'm not Indigenous, but I do feel like the whole idea of sustainability is tied up with, well, how does the average person get there?
Yeah, thank you. And, I think there is a role for the regional issue for joint resilience from a interjurisdictional coordination. And I'm trying to look at what we can explicitly name and integrate into our strategic planning. Do we have anything, what would be your recommendations to strengthen our interjurisdictional collaboration? I know we've mentioned MOUs, but what would you recommend from your vantage points, both of you? Yeah.
Thank you. The SGMP, the Sustainable Growth Management Plan, will undoubtedly address water. Number of documents like this can take maybe describe principles or axioms. Water is life, a principle, for example, an axiom of living. And that kind of information, of course, is very high level, visionary, but it really lays the foundation of our values and how we treat water and how we treat land. One thing specific that we're considering and is in the SGMP, I mentioned a preferred land use plan. Where do we put all these people? Basically is the question. Without sacrificing environment, water, resources, culture, community, the needs, access to resources. So a lot of community design is involved in that. But one approach where I would like to take in the preferred land use plan is by watershed. That the watershed is the unit of analysis. It's the unit of planning. It is the unit for understanding the community. Watershed, I think, is very inherently understood around here. And it's a platform for a conversation. And then when we look at the land from the watershed and we remove all those borders, I think it opens up a conversation about how we treat the land and its relationship to water, which is that an Indigenous point of view? It's just, I don't know. I'm not. That's Herbert's approach to how we can achieve this project and address how we can address water resources, infrastructure, and these relationships as in terms of watershed.
Thank you. And, I've been looking at consultants, what's the Dene communities, Navajo Nation doing, what are some of the Pueblos. I think there's resilience, Indigenous planners around water, and we haven't heard those at least since I've been here in January. I don't know if there's room for consultative services from these folks as we look at our strategic planning, as you're looking at updating our sustainable development codes. But I wanted to know what are the incentives, conservation and reuse? Do we have anything written that we can update or focus on in strategic planning this week?
Commissioner Kakari Stone, I think Jacqueline's going to touch on some of that.
Okay. That's great. I appreciate that. And then just one other question, and I appreciate, do we have a dashboard that actually tracks water usage in the county? Is it something that we can consider as we look at transparency? I had brought up the idea of also putting online who we buy from, who we sell to, as a transparency system for accountable government.
Commissioner Kakari Stone, that's a little out of my wheelhouse, but
Sure.
I know Brian's team tracks all of that data very thoroughly, so I won't speak to how available it is to the public.
Commissioner, we do track the data through our water customers, but we do not have a dashboard that's outward facing. And I think we heard that during Travis's and Michael's conversation earlier this month or end of last month, to start looking at that and how we share that information, but we do not have that currently.
Well, thank you. It sounds though we have the capacity, and as we look at more collaborations with the city, that might be a neat opportunity with the new administration and some new counselors and mayor to think about how we can do a joint tracking. I would love that, us moving forward. And then finally, as you think about partnerships, please count me in we have the Agua Fria Water Association, very, very strong network. You know, we're looking at water rights across many generations. They're very active. And the Spanish-speaking community on the south side, I've been working with the counselors that overlay in that district that I'm in. Definitely a need, and I want to re-echo Ms. Bird's suggestion, and I really support that. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. A follow-up comment, Commissioner Green?
I think, yep, this is working. So one of the things that I hope we can start to look at is when we look at like an ADU, that counts as a unit, right? But ADUs are sometimes a quarter the size of another unit. And so to start to give some qualitative and quantitative benefit to smaller units. So a unit isn't a unit isn't a unit. A McMansion that's 6,000 square feet and 8 bathrooms and so on is not the same as an ADU that your parents or your grandchildren can live in on your same property and has less impact on our water systems. And so that we start to give more granular detail to that and incentivize smaller units, maybe the form-based code and different more innovative ways in whatever our next generation plan comes out to be. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions from the chamber, I'd like to see if we have any questions online.
For our online users, please raise your digital hands to signify that you'd like to speak or ask a question.
We have no questions online. Thank you both very much. For those of you who are recording Sagebird, it's going to be recorded. This is actually being recorded right now. So I understand you want to use your phone, and that's okay, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Okay. Okay. Sure.
Yes, I understand there's a housing crisis in Santa Fe County with the prices. Is there any future plan to solve this without looking to monetize it or, because, or capitalize on solving the housing crisis, like partnering with developers who might maybe take tax credits so it's instead of big payments, so it's better for the people who are looking to become homeowners?
If I may direct that to the project that we have 2 really amazing projects that are being supported, and I don't want to misspeak on the name of those 2 projects. If you want to let them know. Yeah, the 2 that, absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. There are 3 tax credit projects that are coming online that the county has supported, both with direct financial assistance as well as other incentives. So that's, my past work was with the City of Santa Fe as the Affordable Housing Director, and that was the approach. We would leverage the investment from the private sector by providing incentives and making it easier for developers to build housing with a variety of price points.
Thank you very much. More, Herbert?
Thank you. One recommendation that I know is going to end up at least in the Sustainable Growth Management Plans, we might call incremental development. It's amending our development regulations for parking, lot coverage, some of those kinds of things, but also a program of education and technical assistance for what we call land-rich, cash-poor families and communities who may want and need a rental house in the back or something for grandma or cousin. So this program and the code amendments would come and allow local landowners to build their own rental house in their backyard or side yard or wherever. So it's really empowering local people to meet their own needs, one bedroom at a time, one building at a time, so we don't wait for the 244 unit from the big developer to hopefully they give us more affordable than they're committed to. it's a different approach that I believe will empower local folks. And there's a lot of tools out there that will enable this. I have every reason to believe that it will be not in place now, but will be a recommendation from this process.
Thank you very much. All right.
Just to clarify, those projects are 100% affordable.
Very good. Are or aren't? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. On to item 6, water resilience and sustainability, the Community Development Department. We'll be hearing from Jacqueline Beam, our Sustainability Manager.
Good morning, everyone. Jacqueline Beam, Sustainability Manager with the Community Development Department. And I guess I am sweeping up the rear here to talk about more about the behaviors as we work with water and manage our water that's available to us. I briefly just want to talk about the Climate Action Plan, and these are all of the areas that the Sustainability Division is actively working with conservation as well as keeping in mind the nexus between energy and water usage. We have a number of programs online that we keep up and available and updated as much as possible so that constituents can find resources and tools to help manage their own water and their own water footprint. We also have a green stormwater infrastructure that I will be talking about, and Alex referred to that briefly in our guide that is coming out. And then we have a water policy advisory committee that we also are a liaison for. And exciting news for our Next Generation Water Summit coming up in 26. We will be focusing our portion of that summit, which is a nationwide, it's recognized nationwide. Our portion of that summit for the county will be on rural and traditional usage of water and gray water usage. So with that, how do we support small community water systems? The Climate Action Plan focuses mainly on the energy side of things, admittedly, but we also have a chance with our nature-based climate solutions to decrease carbon by 25%. And a lot of that has to do with just how we manage the soil in our communities. We look mainly at soil health and vegetation and coverage. And so we're looking at agriculture, and Laird Grazier will be talking a little bit more after myself on data regarding that. But our agriculture uses up to 60% of our water statewide. And so those are areas that are low-hanging fruit that we can really focus on. All of the ecosystem services that we have in our Climate Action Plan were evaluated for risks, and the risk assessments through the USGS and First Street Foundation told us that, they reported that, of course, wildfire is the highest, but what happens to the soil as a result of wildfire is really the main problem, because that bakes your top layer and you can't get penetration or infiltration from the water. So then that leads to flooding. And there's all kinds of low-hanging fruit, things that we can do on the individual level, residential level, developer level, to increase infiltration through just low-tech means. On the energy and water conservation nexus, of course, the further you have to pump water, the more you use in energy, the more water you're going to use. So if we're always thinking about those things, that will help in our SLDC upgrades and updates as well. And then the upgrades to the SLDC is something that we're working actively with growth management on. And we provided to growth management, and hopefully a lot of those things will be coming forth in more concrete form. but we provided 2 growth management recommendations for the GSI, which is Green Stormwater Infrastructure, not only as it relates to the residential level, but roads, medians, all of those areas are ways, those are opportunities for us to harvest water and infiltrate. And on our website, these are active tools that anyone can get on to sustainability under the departments section, under Community Development Department. And you can look at a water calculator and see how much water you're using as it relates to the average. And the nationwide average is 82 gallons per day. Just think, in general terms, every minute you spend in a shower is about a gallon. And so any of those fixtures that you have and appliances that you can use WaterSense products to replace will significantly reduce your water usage. I highly recommend the water footprint as opposed to the water calculator, just a personal note. And then also I want to talk about native plants. My goal in focusing on these low-tech solutions is that we all start to feel a little bit more empowered to do what we can in our own yards, in our own, whether it's volunteering. If you don't have a yard, there are so many things that we can do. And native plants are drought tolerant naturally. We need to move away from the idea of xeriscaping, which is lots of rock and gravel that increases the temperature of the soil significantly. And all it does is bake the soil, and it creates a more difficult transaction between the water infiltrating and you lose your nutrients. It's not good. So I hear that often, and I know even in Albuquerque they're looking at xeriscaping quite a bit, but it really is it's a great way to increase your heat island effect, basically, and decrease the soil health. So xeriscaping and permaculture tips are also on our website. And we, as a county, are mainly looking at domestic well users and mutual domestics. We only have 4,000 folks that are on our utility right now. And so when we approach this challenge, we're looking at those behaviors and how can we influence folks in a way that will help them to think of the natural resources that they have and available, and we do have enough. If we are looking at, for instance, green stormwater infrastructure, we have 12 to 14 inches of precipitation. And one easy way to calculate for harvesting your rainwater is to keep, as Alex mentioned, keep all of the water on site. And you can look at that 12 to 14 inches can lead, depending upon the size of your rooftop. I'm trying to find the calculation here. I should know it off the top of my head, but I don't. You can irrigate for at least a season from our monsoons that we're receiving now. And the time of the huge retention pond is gone, and it's gone. So let's look at much smaller rain gardens throughout the properties and ways to incentivize through the SLDC for developers to create infiltration in smaller areas, which increases canopy, increases native planting, and also lowers the temperature of the soil and increases the health of the soil. One way that we offer that through our compost program, and that's an easy way to increase organic matter and make your soil a lot more spongy, is by composting. And it's something that we offer to at least 50 folks every year, and we're seeking to increase that this year if it's possible. And there are many ways that everyone can compost. It's a very low, inexpensive, low-tech way to increase your soil. I bring up my fixer-upper. Many many times, but I will bring it up again. I started out with a backyard that was nothing but sand, and over the last 6 years, I've just been composting and increasing my soil health, reshaping so that I'm catching water, and it is becoming the most luxurious native pollinator oasis in comparison to what it was, just by a little work every year. And so that's something that we are trying to focus on in our division. Also, our Earth Day and workshops, we provide rain garden workshops, and we work with the Santa Fe Watershed Association, Xerces, River Source. All of those workshops we advertise in our newsletter, and again, the Next Generation Water Summit, which is coming up in June, and that will be an opportunity for everyone to come and learn more about, for instance, the agricultural reuse. I was just in a tour, it was an urban greening tour by Bezos Grant in Albuquerque, and they're doing some great things with gray water usage and agriculture. And I would love to see us working more with the aggregate program, for instance. And as Alex has her ideals of where we're headed, I would love to see us incentivize some of these things through the SLDC so that we're not increasing the cost necessarily, but we're focusing on low-tech ways. And if we are increasing the costs, we're offsetting it through incentives. The green stormwater infrastructure, I do have a list of what we will be focusing on. If I can find it. And it will be soil health, financing for water, and I know Andrew's working with Mutual Domestics on a cohesive way to bring mutual domestics together to help support each other. And so the finance for water will be another avenue that we can reach mutual domestic operators. And I know that the Green Chamber also works with hotels on a program to incentivize water usage or bringing down water usage. And so all of those things are something that we're actively working towards. We do not have, like the city, rebates currently. We don't have anything other than the incentives that a homeowner or a developer can look at and think about ways to make their project or their location more appealing, healthier. And so that's something that through the SLDC that we can all focus on and collaborate together. This is the guide. It's in its baby format, but I'm happy to pass it around if anyone wants to look at it. And it has not been finished, but it should be finished in December. And it's the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Guide that Alex was referring to. It addresses both areas that might be a little bit more densely populated as well as more rural areas. And it's a go-to guide. I will say, if you're looking at a large rain garden, it can get costly if you do it right. And so there are ways that you can do it in a much smaller scale at your home, and this guide will show you how to do that, whether it's incrementally creating divots and soil sponges, which are just wood chips in the ground, inoculating with mycorrhizal and fungi. All of those things will help to infiltrate water and absorb water and hold it for future use. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the chambers? For Jacqueline, do we have question, Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Jacqueline. I appreciate looking at traditional communities and these small rural communities. I'm wondering if there's a focus on agricultural land. I see the nexus of water for agriculture and land preservation and water preservation, working with the acequias, working with all of those. Is there a specific carve out for that focus?
Absolutely, Commissioner. I have to admit that most of our focus in the recent 3-4 years has been on energy as opposed to water and resilience. And that is something that we're seeing in sustainability best practices, is the move towards resiliency, because we're already getting the extreme weather events. So we need to start thinking about ways to mitigate some of the flooding and work together more closely in agriculture. And as I stated, 60%, I believe it was 60% of our state water is used in irrigation. So what can we do to investigate gray water usage for those that are in? What about crops? They're looking at saffron in some locations and moving away from alfalfa, which requires a lot of water. And so without getting too deep into the weeds in that, I think that's an opportunity absolutely for us to work with growth management and the aggregate program. And in our WPAC, we are already working with the Mayordomos and the Acequia associations, and so a lot of continued work.
Additionally, looking at trying to mitigate heat island effect and having native trees and shady spaces, and we don't necessarily need a lawn on everybody's property, but you probably need a tree, right? Something to sit under and to reduce that heat island effect. And so building that into the SLDC, the SM strategic
GMP.
land, yes. And trying to find those best practices to make us a more verdant place, but using water judiciously to make sure that we have greener spaces. But it's not lawns, it's not, wasteful use. It's really effective, impactful. So.
Absolutely. The more coverage you have on that soil, the better, and native species as much as possible. Up to 70% of your space needs to be native in order for that ecosystem to operate optimally. So it's always a good rule of thumb as you're planting.
Great, thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Anyone online?
For our online users, please raise your digital hand if you'd like to speak.
No? Okay. Commissioner Kakar-Stone? Okay. Commissioner Kakar-Stone, and then Commissioner Hughes.
Yeah, thank you for all your work, Jacqueline, and your team. I'm just curious because when I was looking at some former reports and then reading some historical data, certainly the hotel industry and tourism really does drive the water usage. And what do we do as a county? Do we have any credits or rebates, or can we do green hotel certification that's county run? I'd like to know your creative ideas on how to really incentivize conservation. And then can we work with New Mexico True to publish hotels and really think creatively working across silos in the county?
Sure. I will probably defer to Glenn from the Green Chamber regarding the county program for hotels that has been established. And I know most of the hotels are in the city, but it is a program that's active. And as far as rebates are concerned, we do not have anything right now in line. We have worked periodically in the past with Save Water Santa Fe, and they have some great programs that I would love to see us emulate. If we can move around the challenge of the anti-donation clause. That's something that has come up in the past for us. And so we just have to show the quantitative benefit to all in order to justify it.
Thank you. And regarding individual users and rain barrels, they're very expensive. I know my mother-in-law couldn't afford maybe just one rain barrel. Can we collaborate with the city to do bulk purchasing and offer steeper discounts on rain barrels?
That is definitely a potential. I would take it a step further and work with residents on diverting that water, because what's happening now is our storms are so large and they're getting dumped on in a way that they're just overflowing. And so it's not really helping us long term. So you can't store that water that's just spilling over. And so the Green Stormwater Infrastructure guide will also talk about that, ways that folks can divert their water. And then there's also I would love to see a laundry to landscape program in our SLDC as well. And in this tour that we did with the Green Basis Urban Greening Grant, there are kits that you can get for $400, $500 if you're a do-it-yourselfer, and start reusing your water from your laundry, and not from your kitchen sink, but from your taps, other taps. And that's an easy to do thing. I mean, you can take that all the way up to, $40,000 if you really want to hire someone to come in and completely redo your water system. But there are accessible ways, and I would love to see that as an incentive that potentially we could look at, if especially folks are on domestic wells, that can stretch your domestic well usage for years just by reusing your laundry.
I appreciate that. I love your creative ideas. I also just want to do a reality check on the incomes of most of our communities. I mean, I live on the south side. Most of the incomes, people are living under the poverty level, but we have a large proportion of growth of immigrant communities, those who can't afford this. Is there a way to get grants to be able to offer free of charge or a small fee for rain barrels, or this $500 laundry to landscape system?
I will just be honest. We're very understaffed right now, and we're trying to wrap up some grants, but it is definitely next on our list to look at grants for more green stormwater infrastructure and assisting in this way. I think the affordable housing folks, those that qualify under the AMI, they would not be, if I'm understanding that correctly, they would not be held to the same rules of the anti-donation clause. So I think there is definitely an opportunity there that we should pursue.
I appreciate that. And I think earlier this year, we did discuss maybe that the county needed a grant management, at least one FTE across to help go look for grants. And I believe we discussed it with the county manager, and we're looking at, County Manager Schaefer, did we fund a full-time position for grants manager?
Chair Bustamante, Commissioner Kikari Stone, yes, that FTE was funded. We have not yet been successful in filling it. In parallel to those efforts, the state has recently stood up within, I believe, the Department of Finance and Administration, a capital grants unit to work specifically with local governments and state agencies to identify opportunities. So in the interim, and even after that position is filled, we'll also leverage those state-provided resources to identify grant opportunities in any area of interest.
Thank you, County Manager. A lot of people have lost their jobs at universities and education institutions that work on grants. Maybe we could try to recruit someone who needs a job due to NIH cuts and stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hughes.
Yeah, this is similar to my question about affordable housing, but I wonder if we need changes to the SLDC to implement some of your ideas, and are we going to bring those forward in strategic planning or later?
I believe strategic planning would be a great place to look at some of the, for instance, we have a chapter in the SLDC that's just kind of on hold for water issues, and so really focusing as a collective on the conservation ideas would be a great brainstorming session. We just recently started up again with the Sustainability and Livability Working Group with Growth Management, and we'll be meeting regularly to discuss those recommendations that were made by the contractor in the GSI process. But every opportunity we have, I believe we should tackle these issues.
So that's going to go forward to actually making changes to the SLDC at some point in the future?
Correct.
Yes,
And I
okay.
believe the goal is within the next year and a half. Year? I'm looking at Alex regarding the timeline.
Yeah, we ought to, I don't know, work diligently to get those to happen rather than wait. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? We have a question, comment question in the back. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a reply to Commissioner Kakari Stone, Glenn Schiffbauer with the Santa Fe Green Chamber of Commerce, we have about 120 businesses that are part of the Certified WaterWise program in the city. We have in the past discussed what we can do in the county. It's my understanding that you don't have a great number of businesses that are part of your water utility. A lot of the resorts and hospitality businesses have their own wells. That said, in our participation in the Lodgers Association, there is an appetite, I believe, of the sustainability culture with these properties. So even if they're on a well and there isn't a cost necessarily that is impacting what their water usage might be, they are hoping to be viewed as good stewards of our natural resources. And I think that there is some opportunity there. Whether it saves the county necessarily in water, it really would impact the aquifer in some ways.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jacqueline. This just kind of thought came to me. Sorry if you had actually addressed it, and thank you for sharing about the WaterWise program that the Green Chamber is doing on its own. Is there a WaterWise or equivalent program for agriculture, meaning a training program for agricultural producers who obviously need a certain amount of water to plant and grow, but may not need as much as they are allotted and use? And so I know that the majority of our water use goes to agriculture across the state. Santa Fe has some in the south and in the north, and this maybe is better as a statewide program, but is there something akin to that in Santa Fe County?
So, Commissioner, we work more and more closely with Healthy Soils New Mexico, and I would say that they come the closest to teaching workshops and working directly with farmers on increasing healthy soils and irrigation, innovative irrigation ideas. But it's mainly through the lens of how to increase the soil health. And so off the top of my head, I full transparency, feel like I'm trying to catch up in the water world right now because we've been so focused on energy. And so that is something I definitely want to work with Aggregate and Growth Management and Joseph, who focuses more on agriculture and food security in ways that we can start providing those opportunities together.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, an idea might be that the commission tour a site where they do soil health training. I don't know very much about it, so I would be interested to personally learn more, but also, as I understand it, the healthier the soil, the more it retains sort of the natural humidity, liquid. So I think that's something that it's worth us pursuing, even if it's not, in the short term. But thank you.
Absolutely.
With regard to that, and there's one when we talk about going out and getting grants, finding money, et cetera, and I do understand that the more, and I'm hesitant to use the word traditional because it's not traditional, but it is the way that the U.S. has been doing food systems. And there is an appetite. I like when we talk about water and food that we talk about appetites. Let me just tell you, it happens all the time with everything because we take deep dives when we talk about water. I'm just saying. But that being said, the Extension Office, this is their job. There are federal dollars, lots of federal dollars, that require their presence in our communities and require that every state has an extension and that it comes from the land grant institution. And when I say their traditional ways, the way that agriculture has been done, just, pour it and burn it, just use it up and it'll evaporate and it doesn't matter because we're going to get as much of whatever we get, we're doing it. But we have a very good extension office, and I think our opportunity, knowing that that the NMSU World being our land grant institution is both a resource and an opportunity to have them work within our values, because the president of that institution made visits to all of the agricultural communities, including ours, and Commissioner Green and I were there. And there is something to be said for, if Healthy Soils is doing a lot of work and we're looking for donations to do things, how will they work with us within our values to help support healthy soils and water, et cetera. So I say that as a recognizing their presence, because I haven't heard anything yet when we talk about agriculture, and that's critical and important. Commissioner?
Sort of along those lines, we have a old school tradition of flooding and acequia agriculture, which works but is wasteful, right? And so I've seen a study decades ago that said that by doing drip irrigation and still using the acequias to utilize the water, but then converting farms into drip irrigation can cut water use by 2/3 or even 3/4. And so maybe there's a program to help modernize some of the farms in Santa Fe County so that they can conserve water. There may be a benefit, we should study that, as to how we can, allow that water to be reused for whatever other use other than agriculture, but more effectively and more efficiently. It helps with weeding, it helps with a whole bunch of things in drip irrigation as opposed to just flooding. So I don't know.
That's already been the case, and they've been doing that with the extension offices now. So it's very much part of the discussion, but I appreciate that. And flood irrigation isn't the primary way of doing agriculture, but that's a whole other conversation. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and if I might add, there are some interesting studies on flooding that you actually do increase the soil health when you flood as opposed to drip irrigation. And in California, they stopped flooding and they found that their aquifers weren't being recharged. And so I think it's a case-by-case basis depending upon how close you are to that water entering the acequia and whether it's, I think it's not a general blanket concept that we can throw over everything.
That's why I said we need to study it. But
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you. Did anyone else have anything else to say? Otherwise, the next thing that we have is information on the Next Generation Water Summit and a speaker from WPAC. So
Laird Graysher. Mm-hmm.
Larry? Okay, Larry's next. Thank you, Larry.
Laird,
The other thing that I would like to share with you all is the WPAC is working on their annual plan, the work plan. And one of those that was brought to my attention on Saturday at a community breakfast is the identification, a 10-year work plan to map all of the arroyos in Santa Fe County with the intent to install flood control and aquifer recharge measures, which is brilliant because the flooding has caused damage. Meanwhile, it just runs away and it is not recharging. So that's a huge opportunity, and I loved hearing that. Larry, thank you.
Yeah, my name is Laird Grazer, and I started working for the state in 1986 as chief economist for the tax department. Now, The tax department has an enormous amount of numbers and only a little information. So my job for the last 35, 40 years has been to convert data into understanding. So when I was first appointed by Commissioner Bustamante to the Water Policy Advisory Committee, the first thing I asked is, where are we? And so what I am about to tell you here is a result of a very preliminary analysis of where we are. So my tradition has always been you can't manage what you can't measure. So our Water Policy Advisory Committee is, with my urging, has tried to to get more involved in the numbers of what we are doing. Our job is basically to make policy recommendations, but still in all, numbers are important. Mostly in these workshops and as in the Water Policy Advisory Committee, we focus more on the city-county and the north part of the county. But there's lots of ways that we are using water in the county. So domestic, sanitary, irrigation, commercial, livestock, mining, and public systems. So my question was, how much are each of those components using? So I'm not going to go through this. I want to get right to here. The primary data source is called points of diversion, and it's quite current. I found some September wells listed in the Santa Fe County data on this points of diversion available from the Office of State Engineer. So the first thing I wanted to know was, can we geolocate the wells in Santa Fe County? And the answer is, with this points of diversion, we can do a reasonably good job of knowing where the wells are. Is that going to help us use or get the withdrawals in terms of acre feet or gallons? No, but that's the next step. So I want you to just go over this a little bit. 21,000 of the 222,000 total wells listed in the POD statewide, we have about 10% of them. 21,677. Now this data goes back a long way. There's some 1775 water rights in this database. But of the 21,000, 7,000, we're still up, yeah. So 7,000 are really inactive. So either plugged or dry or canceled or no water rights or showing 0% or 0 feet depth. So that leaves us with 12,572 active domestic wells. Now, this includes multiple and also combined. There's a category called domestic livestock, and there's a domestic sanitary. But you go through this. Now, livestock is very, very big. This does include domestic livestock. Commercial, 138. Sanitary, and this includes domestic sanitary. I'm not quite sure what that category is, but as I say, this is kind of the first investigation in my way. So I will probably learn more about that later. Irrigation, and this is not. Remember, wells are groundwater, not surface water. And our acequias, for the most part, are surface water. So it's kind of interesting. 343 irrigation wells. Where are they? At this point, I don't quite know, but I will tell you that
within some period of time, I will be able to give you a map of where the irrigation wells are. So you go through this, and basically this is a very, very interesting thing. But what do we do with it? The answer is okay. All right. As a side note on that last database, almost 3,700 wells have been adjudicated, mostly in the NPT basin. That's the Nambe, Poake, Tasuki basin. And that I think at least, that must have something to do with the Amott case, because the adjudications are also listed in the Water Masters data and reports. So of this, interestingly enough, of our roughly 12,000 wells, 4,352 are listed in that NPT area. And the other interesting thing was, it pretty much goes to Alex's point, which is this database also, because it's quite current, you can find out how many wells by year have been permitted and drilled. So this little statistic is 416 wells have been completed since January 1st, 2020. So in a 4 3/4 years, 416 wells. Well, important, but it's not overwhelming. So a lot of the wells in the county are historic, or at least, even mine. I drilled mine in '93. So all of a sudden I have more than 25 years. So, and then I will go forward. Okay. So now we need to close the loop. Of those wells, how much are we withdrawing, either as surface water or as groundwater? And this is a once every 5-year state effort, and it's called the Water Report. And unfortunately, it is, by the time it gets published, it's already pretty old. The 2020 data was only published for public consumption around April or May of 2025. So one of my thoughts was, can we, either at water policy or with the assistance of staff, somehow advance that? Because as we all learned with our RBA training, we need to propose projects and then close the loop to the point where we can measure whether our policies have had any influence on conservation or whatever we want to do. Utilization, gray water systems, whatever. So this was my effort to kind of present this water data in a way that we could get some information out of, and that might lead to methods for advancing this. So let's go through this, because it's really important. And the way it's organized is surface water, groundwater, total water, and then we have some information about how does this compare to the state. So public water supply. And this is almost exclusively, as you see, it's 25% in terms of surface water, but mostly, 53%, rather, 25% of the total surface water, the 28,000 acre feet, is devoted to public water supply. And then in terms of groundwater, that's 53% of the county's use of groundwater is the public water supplies. So, that's interesting. Now, in terms of total water, roughly a third of the withdrawals are the public water supplies. This includes all of mutual domestics and city and county, and the El Dorado mutual domestic and the Edgewood mutual domestics and the mutual domestics out of Cerrillos and Galisteo. So, pretty interesting. And the last thing is I thought I would compare this, our usage in terms of the percentage of the state's water. How does that compare to our population ratio? And so in most cases, we're doing pretty well. So, but the next category I'm particularly interested in because, Jacqueline particularly and the other county staff are struggling with this requirement that mutual domestic, or the domestic users, the domestic well users, report to the county. Well, I shouldn't go on public record, but I've only reported my usage twice. Once when I drilled the well, and once when I replaced all of the internal plumbing. I'm not even sure. What was interesting is when I reported the change in a meter, which I had done roughly 12, 13 years into my well's lifetime, I had a hard time finding where in the Office of State Engineer I should report. And they took my report and said, "Thank you very much." I almost thought that she put it into the wastebasket. Okay, so I think aside from, I want to there we are. Okay, so this is probably the most intriguing chart, and it comes from doing a geolocating of the POD data. And the light blue is 0 to 25 wells per section. The mid blue is 25 to 50 wells per section. And finally, the dark blue is more than 50. There's a few sections that have over 100, but not enough to make it worthwhile. So I can do this same chart for irrigation or for any of the other categories, and I will probably do this for the water policy. Is this not an interesting chart?
Larry, is this a chart or a map?
It's an Excel chart where I have tried to simulate the map. So you do have map coordinates on the left side and the top, which gives township and range. And then internally, within the 36 sections in any, so you have to kind of infer that. But it's really an Excel product. All right, so I will be very happy to discuss any questions.
Thank you, and I understand this will be available online as well.
We haven't made, we can certainly do that.
Very good.
There's one other, well, let's see. Yeah, okay. Okay.
Do we have any questions for Larry?
Thank you so much. My name is Maury Hensley. I'm the Executive Director of the Santa Fe Watershed Association. Really fascinating presentation, Laird. Thank you. I was wondering where public fill stations come into play in these numbers. I've been learning recently about the growing need for these fill stations, but also the challenge of measuring how much water is being used, where that water is going, what that water is being used for, how to incentivize conservation, but also as the wells of county residents throughout different parts of the county are drying up or the water quality is decreasing, we're seeing an increasing dependence on these fill stations. So I'm wondering how the numbers of usage compare with the other categories you were measuring, or if you've come up against any challenges understanding those numbers, and what we can understand for future projections, given that wells are still drying up, that there's some complexity in rural water use and dependency on these fill stations. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what you're basically telling me is I need to go forward with my data analysis project. I have downloaded the 2005, 10, 15, and 20 water reports, and I noticed some trends, but the real hard part of that is that the agricultural component, of which in 2020 was 60% of the total use of water in Santa Fe County, was ag, but the 5, 10, 15, and 20 reports are all over the map, because the methodology of the report has to do with how much rain. So it's a combination of how many acres in any particular crop and how much water do any particular crop take, but then you have the possibility of a lot of rain, and when you don't have rain, then you have to use groundwater. But that's the first thing that I noted in that the annual is just all over the map. But that's why I kind of want to figure out if we can do that on a more current basis. Now, will that lead to any sort of policy recommendations? I'm not sure. On the other hand, if you don't know what you're using, how can you make good policy recommendations? So, anyway, now my colleague Peter here is very, very strongly of the opinion that I am spinning my wheels here, because our job at WPAC is policy recommendations, and my insistence, or at least my interest in the data, is really outside of our scope. So the question is can we encourage somebody on staff to take over this job? And as much as I love my daughter-in-law, that's not a task that I want to assign to add to her overall burden. So
We appreciate that, and I think everybody understands how can you set policy on things you can't measure. I think you said it up front, so appreciate that. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns?
If I could add to
Yes,
that,
Manager
Chair
Schaefer.
Bustamante.
Yes.
So relative to the bulk water filling stations that Santa Fe County currently operates, and one that we currently operate, and the 2, I believe, additional ones that should come online soon, that usage would show up in the public water system data, because that would count as part of the water supply that is produced and delivered by the Santa Fe County Public Water Utility. So that's where you would capture that data. Relative to the customers, I defer to our Public Works Department Director Brian Snyder, but we do know who's using the water, because they have to set up accounts with the county and in their billed for the water that they in fact utilize. So I did want to provide that specific response to your questions. Looking further afield in terms of things that the county is actively pursuing, is we'll be bringing forward to the Board of County Commissioners in 2026, I believe, a reclaimed water master plan to get guidance as to how the board may want to utilize the increasing supply of reclaimed water through our water reclamation facility on state penitentiary grounds. A suggestion I would anticipate would be that that water be made available for commercial users who need water for dust suppression purposes but don't need potable water for that purpose. So I just wanted to bring that tie back relative to ways in which the county is actively exploring ways as to how to use treated effluent. And Brian, if I got any of that wrong, just raise your hand and correct me. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Schaefer. Commissioner Green.
Thank you for that presentation. It was interesting to get into the detail and the data. This is something that's useful for us, and so it's appreciated. And if there is sort of consensus within the commission to have that brought in-house, we should discuss that, because I think that that's a useful bit of information, and it's a baseline for our future growth, right? So to understand where we're going with this. And sort of to that point, there's two things that, one is surface water, right? So this is all groundwater, and surface water is a big player in agriculture. But I was surprised to see 60% of groundwater was being utilized for agriculture. That was a surprising. I figured that would be just a incremental, very small amount, but I was surprised. And then I think also for us to understand how, the surface water we're going to be shifting in the north when the Amet project, when the Pojoaque Basin project comes online, that over time we'll start to, move some people away from groundwater and into surface water. So I think there's a great baseline that you're creating, and we can start to understand where we, over time we move this thing. So I appreciate the work, and thank you.
There's also a fascinating report dated 2024 from the Water Master, primarily on the NPT, and this is I'm on my second reading, and I'm getting about 20% of what I'm reading. It'll take some more time. It's a very, very technical report, but it's fascinating because it also tells you about the adjudication in the NPT, and it goes to river flows. It goes to just a whole lot of interesting data.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to recognize, these are volunteers. I'm grateful. We're very grateful for the work that you all do, especially those of you who are in the room right now and everyone who is unable to be with us today. Any other questions, comments, or concerns?
She's raising her hand back.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
Hi, thank you, commissioners. To this point that Commissioner Green just made, which is such a good one. El Dorado tracks our groundwater very closely for obvious reasons that have been made public very often. I think 260 wells is a lot. We have 291 wells exactly at this moment within the El Dorado service area, and all of those straws in the ground are allowed to take 3 acre-feet per the laws from the state engineer. As someone who worked for that organization prior, this is just a comment about the pod finder, which is that it is not as updated as you have pointed out, very astutely, might I add, sir. Thank you for doing that. And it would be very helpful, I think, across our organizations to share our data, because, as I said, we in El Dorado are tracking this very closely, because we are going to start making active moves to try and communicate to customers the great benefits of not exploiting the groundwater use. And I'm using that word very intentionally because it is exploitation. And we as communities can come together. The only word that's coming to my mind is to regionalize. And I understand regionalization is like pumpkin pie, okay? Not everybody likes it. There's a ton of ingredients. They can all be mixed together, and you might be like very hesitant at first. I would be. Sometimes my mom makes pumpkin pie, and I'm like, I don't know, Mom, about that. Anyway, it's just a metaphor for that regionalization can take many forms. It can have many ways of displaying, and anyway, this is one way perhaps our organizations can partner and transmit data, try to find the best ways to convince public members who have private domestic 72-12 wells to report their data, like you're describing, to meter their data with smart meters so we can track more efficiently the drop-by-drop usage. I know there has been a lot of questions from Eldoradans about why our district is switching to smart metering and how important that is for us all to be responsible desert dwellers. And anyway, I just think it's so important. I agree with you. You cannot make informed decisions without good data. And anyway, I fully support this effort. It's not a question. It's just an act to work together. And I'm happy to be supportive of any of WPAC's initiatives. So thank you.
Among other of my little projects has been to put together a list of all 83 active water systems and commercial users in the county. And I, at some point, I will probably do something with that list, but the first thing would obviously be simply to contact all of the users who are required to report to OSE and see if we can talk them into reporting simultaneously whenever they do report to OSE to report to the county. So that would allow us to update that public water system line in the water report on an almost current basis. Yes.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, do we have any online? Okay, we have an announcement.
This presentation, along with every other presentation that was presented during this meeting, this two-day forum, is available by scanning the QR code if you're in this room, or I sent a link through the chat on Teams, and if you go to Santa Fe County, nm.gov/Santa Fe County Water, they are available there as well.
Thank you.
I was not on the agenda, so I apologize for taking your time.
No, sir, we're grateful. Thank you. Thank you very much. So at this point, that concludes the presentations. And we did have something on the agenda that said we would have conversation. I think the hardiness of this, the issue with the conversation is we've allowed questions and comments throughout. So we won't really open it up that way, as well as we have a substantial number of people online. We do have a page of questions and answers that were received in advance of these meetings, and instead of reading them out to you and answer them online, in present time, we're going to post those questions and answers online so people can see the answers to all of those questions. So I will at this time entertain any closing remarks that anyone would like to make. I'm going to start with just a boatload of gratitude for everyone who put their time aside to make this happen. It's been a long question. It'll continue to come up, but now we also have a resource online that we can direct people to get some of those answers. And the recommendations that have been made and will continue to be worked on through the WPAC are powerful. So I'm grateful for that work as well. So right now, just opening it to any closing comments. Let's start with Sage Bird, and then we'll come to the commissioners.
Thank you for all the work you all do. I would just like to suggest that a fund be created to be able to consult with the people, the original people of this territory, because there are some like shards of waterfall hundreds of years ago. And honestly, when the rain dance was prohibited, it literally stopped raining in this area. And you can see it in scientific data shards. And so really maybe find a stipend to be able to consult with the people that can help you find solutions. And also look to the 10 most sustainable cities in the world who are leaders in water management practices, because we can use their best practices and help this area. And some of those cities are Denmark, in Copenhagen, Denmark, Singapore, in Australia, in Berlin, Germany, and even in New York in the US. And we can replicate that for our county in a way that makes sense for this spot. And I do suggest you find resources to get help to find the solutions.
Thank you, Sage. Anyone else? Commissioner Green?
So I'd like to thank everybody who took part of this. This was great from all different aspects. First off. Second, I don't think that we touched on this really, and I would hope that we could start to look at this maybe for the next version of this, which is not on quantity and supply, supply and demand, but on quality. Right, that becomes a new aspect that we're really dealing with in the La Cienega area, up in part of the NPT, Pewaukee Basin area. There are all sorts of areas where, you know, when we see that the chromium plume is getting closer to San Ildefonso property. That means if it's in San Ildefonso, it's in Santa Fe County. And so we need to start looking at, I would call it a risk factor. And maybe some look at, you know, quality issues and other risk factors such as climate change, and how we can really provide some guidance for ourselves. And if water gets cut off through San Juan Chama, or gets cut off from Buckman Direct, or other different pools that we have, no pun intended, that we need to make sure that we have contingency plans and understand the risks there. So I don't know if that's, obviously we don't have time today, but that's an interesting thing for us to understand in the future.
Thank you. I think it's integral to the work, and I appreciate the comments. Commissioner Kakari-Stone.
Yes, I just want to thank everyone who organized this, and for you, Chair Bustamante, also for pushing this forward as part of our agenda. It's been very rich. And I just want to offer some observations, some key themes that did come from the public on the questions online. Water supply and sources was one of the major themes. Conservation and reuse was a second one. Development, growth, and land use, the third. The fourth, infrastructure, governance, and equity. And the fifth theme from questions and comments online were risk, resiliency, and partnerships. And I think it's important. I'd like to offer the commitment, and we explore as a BCC how we review all our notes. There was some, I think, innovative ideas that came from our staff, from the city, from engineers, and we look at what's possible and feasible in terms of informing our future actions as a BCC. I think one thing in terms of my observations is that transparency is an opportunity here. How we make decisions, how many years, what data we use. And I like Larry's comments around we have to be able to measure it if we want to do something about it. I think that's important. Equity matters as we think about our rural and less served communities. So I was very pleased to hear we're going to be focusing on rural areas moving forward as well. There's this tension as a BCC, in my observation, between growth and versus resources. And I think that remains as we think about strategic planning and the Sustainable Growth Management Plan updates. The third observation is that we can remain and be proactive and a leader, and that multi-jurisdictional collaboration and partnerships do matter with water resiliency, and I think we're doing some of that up north as well as in your district, but how can we explore that even more with the city and with the state and with tribes and pueblos? And finally, how do we evaluate what we're doing? That seems to be a missing link in my observation across our different departments and units, and how do we evaluate our impact? And I'll end with Alex's question around how do we manage in a way that we have water for our future generations, and that brings in what Herbert had mentioned, which I'm so on board with and keep pushing. How do we create an approach that is centered on indigenous knowledge bases and systems, that looks at the interconnectivity of water? Water is life is not just a saying, it is rooted in core values. And how do we revisit the core values of our communities so that we as a BCC can ensure water for future generations? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other takeaway comments that anyone would like to make? We have, yay, good.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to share that I think one thing, and I wasn't able to attend the first day, so this might have been touched on, but the complete intersection of fire and headwaters forest management with water supply. And I know that there is very legitimate concern among the county of forest treatments, but I think it's really important for the county to be part of these conversations, both within the headwaters that are in the county itself, but also the headwaters that the county depends on in the San Juans. And there are partnerships that I know for one, the Santa Fe Watershed Association and many other partners are part of the Greater Santa Fe Fireshed Coalition. And I haven't seen a county representative at those meetings for many years. And so I really invite you to invest in those partnerships, the Rio Grande Water Fund, or, you know, there are numerous partnerships, but I think it's really important for you all to be at the table investing in water quality and water supply from our headwaters ecosystem. So as a future topic, I think that that's another really important component. So hope to see you at the Greater Santa Fe Fireshed Coalition meeting and other collaboratives. Thank you.
That is so critically important right now, and it's an understatement. But anyone who's sitting in here who hasn't been paying attention to what's happening in Mora right now, it's huge. This can burn and absolutely affect everything that we've been talking about. So I appreciate that more than you'll know. Maybe not, maybe you'll really know. So thank everyone. Do we have any comments online? Nope, no comments online. The questions and answers that came up, and thank you, Commissioner Kakari-Stone, for providing us the outline of those areas of questions, will be online, and there will be a place for comment and continued, mulling around. And I'm grateful for the expertise that Santa Fe County has. I think it's an excellent recommendation, necessary effort to be at those fireshed conversations as well. And onward ho. Thank you. Thank you all. Do we have more than a motion to adjourn? Do we have any announcements from the commission? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Also
Motion made by Commissioner Green. Second by Commissioner Hughes. All in favor? This meeting is over. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.